Okay, before we get started on this block, there's a couple things I want to point out. So I have my pattern pieces, and I want you to notice that there's two different kinds of block. So this one has the 4 on the left, and the angle is on this side, and there's an angle on this side over here, and the 4 is on the right. So it's very, very important because the pieces go together a little bit differently, and that has thrown me off in the past. Possibly also on this project too. So just know that there's 4 of these pieces and 4 of these pieces. So when you print your foundation piecing paper or your copy paper or whatever you're using, you're going to need 4 sheets, so 4 of each pattern piece. So when you see that pattern, there's 2 on a piece of paper, but they are 2 different directions, and they are not interchangeable. So just so that you are aware of that, I figured I would start with that. Okay, so now I want to show you a finished block before we even start so you can kind of get a visualization. Now on this one, this was actually the first one I did, so I actually colored in colored pencils so I could remember where my colors were going. You're going to tear the paper away anyway, so it doesn't really matter. So 1, 2, 3, ta-da, super pretty block. So you can see there are 6 pieces. So this is actually 2 different pieces, and then the numbers on the back are the order that you're going to stitch them together. So the 1 and the 2 get stitched together first, then 2 and 3, 3 and 4, 5 and 6. You're going to trim your piece, and you trim your fabric in between and press in between each piece. That pressing is important because if you don't, even if you just finger press, that's okay too, but just make sure that you're doing it so that you're not getting lumpiness. The whole point of this is for really, really accurate piecing, so make sure you're doing that pressing as well. Okay, so I'm going to set this finished one aside again. So this is the top point, and then these are the supporting ones. Really, really pretty block. I will say some of the angles can be kind of confusing, at least for me personally, because I'm easily confused by geometry. Okay, so I'm going to set this aside. Sorry, my hand is in the way there. Alright, so this is the block we're going to do. You can see 1 and 2 need to be stitched together first. I have my fabric right here. I have 2 of the blue pieces. It looks like I am missing a large, and we're back with the remaining blue piece. Alright, so I have all my pieces laid out. Kind of like to see them all. So my 1 piece is this. There's 2 blue pieces. I always use the smaller one for the smaller corner piece there. So my 1 and my 2 are right here. Now, another note about pieces, I have cut mine a bit small. Most of the time it is recommended that you cut your fabric pieces larger, much, much larger than your finished piece to make piecing easier if you mess up like I do all the time. I really, really dislike wasting fabric, and I feel like I'm wasting fabric when I cut big pieces. So I opt for smaller pieces, and I end up doing a lot more with my seam ripper when I get confused. So just a little disclaimer there. If you want to make your life easier, cut your pieces bigger than I did. And I will note the sizes of these pieces in the blog tutorial. Alright, so the number 1 is on top of my blue fabric here, kind of centered in the middle. And I'm totally fine. This is kind of a random thing, so I'm not really worried about placement at all. Now, this fabric. This goes, and you know what? I have this totally backwards. Alright, so your piece of fabric, your first piece of fabric is going to go pretty side down. Okay? Pretty side down, because when you flip this over, this is your front side. Alright? I had that wrong the first time. So, it's going to be pretty side down, and then this pattern piece is going to be relatively pretty side up. Now your next piece, here, and I've centered this just kind of in the middle, and then your next piece is going to go pretty side up. And that allows this blue piece and this other blue piece to be right sides together. Now, the placement of this piece is really important, especially because, as I mentioned, I'm using smaller pieces. So we're going to be sewing along this a little bit so you can see it better, from this line to this line. Now notice that there's a little line here. I actually do not sew that at this point. I will sew that between the 3 and the 4. So I will actually start here, I will back stitch, and then back stitch down here at the end of the 2. Alright, so do a little positioning here. And I have to do quite a bit of playing with this because I am easily confused. You can see I actually turned that the wrong way. Sometimes if it helps you, you can turn it over and kind of crease it so that you can see where the seam is. So I know that my seam is going to be right here, and then my actual piece is going to be right here. So I'm going to stitch right here, and I'm going to flip, and my 2 will be right there. So it looks like this one is in a good spot. And I'm going to go ahead and stitch these together. I wanted to mention one thing. You want to change your stitch length to, usually it's set standardly to 2.5 or so. I have moved mine to 1.8. Now you can vary that a little bit, but a tighter stitch length will help you when you're ready to remove the paper. It'll perforate right out, which is really handy, and it won't affect the strength of your piecing at all. Okay, so that's one thing that I wanted to mention. Back, we have a piece. Now it looks like I may have made a boo-boo, per usual. Oh, there we go. I was folding it backwards. So there's my piece, and it looks like I may have, I probably could have put my placement a little better, but this will work, so I will take it. And I'll show you this better over there. Okay, so I have my first piece stitched. I have made sure that it is in the correct spot, and now without having pressed anything, so before you press, go ahead and fold on the 1 and 2 lines and fold towards the blocks you just did, and make sure that this is extra before you trim it away. And trim it. Alright, and then moment of truth, when you turn it over, voila. I'm gonna go press this, I will be right back. Now you can finger press this, or if you have one of those cool little gizmos, I'm just gonna quick run over to my iron, and I'll be right back. Okay, there are much better foundation paper piecing tutorials out there than mine, so I encourage you to go look for them. But the one thing that's helped me with my piecing, especially with a more complicated block like this, is make sure that you line, if you're worried about your fabric, make sure that you line up your fabric with the line you're stitching on so that the angle will stay the same and it covers the amount that you think it will. Okay, so this between 2 and 3 is going to be a straight line. So I have my fabric and I have it pretty side to pretty side with the pieces I've already done. Make sure I'm over here a little bit. I'm going to offset it because I'm stitching here, but then I'm going to be flipping this piece over so it's under the 3 piece. So I have made sure, absolutely sure. Sorry, I'm just manipulating it so that I can see it. And that it covers my, so it needs to cover this line by at least 1/4 of an inch on this side. So we've got that, so I'm going to go to the machine and stitch it. Alright, so I went ahead and trimmed my pieces, and now we are halfway there. 1, 2, 3. Ta-da! Here, flip it a little bit so you can see. It's not looking like much yet. We're getting there. Alright, so the next piece is number 4. which is this big kahuna right here. This one, I might play a little bit with placement of it. Now for this one, I am placing it right about here. And I know from past experience that if I need to make sure that I keep it nice and low and keep enough space up here because of this angle. And then when I flip it, I'm gonna make sure I cover the corner all the way. So I'm gonna play it really safe with this one. Make sure it's covered. All right, I'm gonna go stitch this, trim it, and I will be right back. Okay, so I just wanted to show you that I did make a little boo-boo here, and I got the angle a little bit wrong, and so when you lay this out, you can see it just barely covers. So that is something that I struggled with on this block. So you want to adjust the angle a little bit more or make a bigger piece, which is what I chose not to do for this. I'm going to go ahead and trim this, flip it, trim it right here, like so. Just do it quick here. I made sure I flipped this back over so I don't cut it off. Press it. One note about the pattern, you'll notice that this line here is more than 1/4 of an inch. When I scaled the pattern up, obviously that's what happened, so it's more than 1/4 of an inch, and I actually left it like that on purpose. Because when I'm making a block, I tend to cut things a little close, and so I just wanted to give you a little extra buffer. So when you trim this down, you'll want to trim this to 1/4 inch from this line right here, because this is your seam allowance. So you want 1/4 inch from here to here. But for now, I left it because it's very, very helpful. All right, just to give you a little extra, and that's why I'm not worried that this doesn't quite cover. All right. All right, moving right along. We are moving on to number 5, which is this absolutely beautiful bright yellow here. All of the fabrics I'm using are from Art Gallery Fabrics' new Mediterranean collection by Caterina Rosella, and I apologize if I just slaughtered her name. Okay, so doodle-doo. Place it kind of over here. It's kind of backwards from the way you might think, because remember you're flipping it this way, and I know that made no sense. But my seam, so I'm doing it from here to here. Now for right here, what I will note is that because it goes off the edge of the page, you can just start over here and skip the back stitching, and then just back stitch at the bottom here. Okay, so I'm gonna make sure this is lined up the way I want it. That looks good. We'll stitch it and I will come back. Okay, ready for the big reveal? Flip, and plenty of room here. That piece had a little more comfort with it. So I'm gonna put it back where it belongs. Flip this over. Trim. It's very satisfying to get that big chunk of fabric off. Alright. And then this little spot at the bottom will all be covered by this guy right here. Okay, we're ready to do the last piece on our block. It's really exciting. Okay, so this one I wanted to show you. So see how this is not over the 6? That always confuses me, but remember that you're flipping it out this way, okay? So that when your block is finished, it's gonna, well, hopefully be like that. Okay, so I hope that helps a little bit. So you wanna basically do the opposite of what your brain would tell you. And then, as I mentioned before, I'm making sure that this line is parallel with the edge of my fabric, and I'm making sure that I'm giving myself enough room here. That should hopefully be good. I'm gonna stitch this down, and this one I don't need to back stitch at all. I'm just gonna go straight from the top to the bottom. It's very, very satisfying. All right, be right back. Okay guys, do you see a problem here? I'm showing you this so that if you learn anything from this, it's that we all make mistakes. Not that I'm an expert at by any means, because I'm definitely not, but when I flip it, it was in the right place. I got the place perfect, but that's not going to work. So, in order to take out your stitching, see, I totally did that on purpose so I could show you this. Not. Alright, I was really hoping to do a perfect block, but not so much. Okay, so see how tiny my stitches are? That's really, really annoying. But you're just going to take your seam ripper and do it on the fabric side. Don't do it on the paper side, because then you're gonna, what you don't want to do is rip your paper, because that's going to give you problems later. Okay, so you're going to take your seam ripper and you're going to go under a stitch. Just pop it, and I am just going to do every 2 or 3 stitches. Just going to pop that. And I'm not going to sit here and make you painfully watch all of my seam ripping, because goodness knows I'm sure you have enough of your own. And I'll show you how it just comes off really easily when I'm done. Okay, I ripped out my seam. So when I just very gently pull, it should start to come apart, hopefully without tearing my paper. Alright. And then there's a part that sticks just a little bit. Oh, there we go. Got it. Alright, so just so I don't repeat the mistakes of the past, right sides together. There we go. That is the correct way to do it. Were you yelling and screaming at me that the last bit? I'll leave that in there just for your entertainment. I'm gonna go stitch this properly and I'll be back. Okay, now I have my block properly stitched together. Ta-da! It's so beautiful. I'm gonna go ahead and trim, press, and then I will come back to trim it off and show you the finished block. To be honest with you, trimming this away is my absolute favorite part because it makes me feel really accomplished. So remember what I said about that seam allowance being more than 1/4 inch. Just make sure you put your ruler on this line and go 1/4 inch. You're gonna cut off a little bit of that paper, and that's okay. There's one side. Then don't forget about this little booger on the end here. Alright. Sorry, moving my camera angle a little bit. There we go. I have a little scrap bucket over here that I keep all the little scraps in because I'm a hoarder and I don't want to throw any of this gorgeous fabric away, so I'm figuring out what to do with it later. Alright, and then one more little corner here. And then we'll be ready for the big reveal. I'm so excited. Alright, ready, flip. So beautiful. Now notice, remember that little bit? Seam allowance took care of it, so it filled in the whole thing. Here's your block. Now make sure that you keep this seam allowance, this 1/4 inch seam allowance, because you're going to stitch your blocks together on this line. So don't remove your paper yet, leave your paper on until we have the whole star together, and then we can start ripping out the paper.